Thank you all so much for joining us today for this boardroom breakfast. As we lead up to Earth Day, we're so excited to host John Calvelli, Executive Vice President of the Wildlife Conservation Society and um, a big champion of ABNY. We're so happy to have him here. Before we get started, you may notice this is a little bit of a different format than our usual one. We wanted to make it a little bit more intimate and give you all a chance to ask questions live. So if you have any questions towards the end of the program, please message me via the chat and I will unmute you and give you the chance to ask John yourself. So, um, you know, as always, thanks for coming. Feel free to follow us at A Better NY on all platforms. And I will pass the camera on to Deputy Borough President Matthew Washington. Thank you all for coming and feel free to turn on your cameras.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Sarah. Sarah did mention that I have the pleasure of serving as Deputy Manhattan Borough President, but my real claim to fame is being a part of the YP of ABNY, although given the amount of gray hair that's showing up in my beard, I don't think I'm going to last much longer in the YP. So thanks for letting me hang on for as long as I can to ABNY. So many thanks to Sarah and Laura and Melva, Madeline, the entire ABNY team that have been great friends and colleagues over the years. And I'm just thrilled to be here today. I am born, bred, and buttered in Manhattan. I'm a natural born New York City kid. But we're here to talk about John Calvelli, who's not only a born and bred New Yorker, he's actually, as we were talking before, born in the mainland of New York City. So the Bronx, as we all know, is the only borough connected to the rest of the lower 48 states of the United States. So we're thrilled to have John here. Just excited to see him. John has just been a wonderful friend, a wonderful colleague, and just a real champion for so many great things over the years. So we're just going to have a good time today. We'll talk a little bit about him, a little bit more about the Wildlife Conservation Society. Certainly we know about their zoos and aquariums, but there's much more that they are doing, and an incredible amount of things that John Calvelli is doing. And as a true Bronx guy, you always got to ask John for a good restaurant recommendation on Arthur Avenue. So let's jump in. Just a couple things I want to share about John that you all probably know, but John Calvelli is Executive Vice President for Public Affairs of the Wildlife Conservation Society, and he joined the Conservation Society after over 15 years in public service, working with elected officials, doing good work on the government end. And just prior to joining the Conservation Society, he worked for Congress member Eliot Engel, when the Republic of Italy bestowed an honorific title of knighthood in the Order of Merit to Mr. Calvelli for his work promoting stronger U.S.-Italy relations. His knighthood is with us this morning, which we're thrilled about. John has just done incredible work in the conservation world. He founded and chairs the International Conservation Partnership and also chairs the Association of Zoos and Aquariums Government Affairs Committee. He serves on an incredible number of boards, the most recent chair of the New York City Cultural Institutions Group. This is really an incredible group, and John has been an amazing leader of that group. Throughout the pandemic, cultural institutions were meeting on a weekly basis just to encourage each other, support one another, and so leading the helm, just trying to figure it all out, and John has been doing just amazing work to make sure that culture has been celebrated in the midst of everything going on in the past year. So that's enough for me. We want to hear from John. And John, just thanks so much for being with ABNY, with the YP group today, for making time. We know you've got a lot going on. So I want to give you a couple moments just to say hello and give us all a greeting.
Good morning, everybody. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. I actually do remember barely when I was a young professional. So I wish we had organizations like this. I want to thank ABNY for organizing this, because one of the things that's most important is really to network and to meet people that have similar interests, or candidly people that don't have similar interests, so that you can learn from each other. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Looking forward to the conversation. I've told my colleagues and friends, I see a couple of them on here, only softballs, no hard questions this morning. So I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
Thanks a lot, John. And we're going to jump in. I do have some questions, but we're certainly going to open it up later. And, please feel free to turn on your video. It's great to see you. And, certainly, especially John here being from the Bronx, I want to give a shout out to all the Bronx folks in the house. I see Timothy Tapia hanging out over there. And so it's the Bronx is in the house today. I will admit, although I am born, bred, and buttered in Manhattan, I'm a Harlem kid. I did live in the Bronx for 3 years of my life. So
we knew there was something good about you. Now we know it was those 3 years in the Bronx, those formative years in the Bronx.
Exactly. Those 3 years in my 20s, they really changed the trajectory of my life. So
absolutely,
I'm better for it, John. So John, we've got a few questions, and
yeah,
why don't we jump in? Can you tell us a little bit more about what the Wildlife Conservation Society is? We hear about it, we know zoos and aquariums, but there's got to be more, right? So what is the Wildlife Conservation Society? So give us that, and then we'll just jump into some more personal things.
Absolutely. So the Wildlife Conservation Society, everybody knows it as the 4 zoos in the aquarium in New York, but we're actually a global conservation organization. We work in approximately 60 countries around the world, and where we work is home to 50% of the world's biological diversity. So literally from the beginning, our commitment has been to helping save the natural world and the wildlife that's there. So we are celebrating 125 years of existence. We are the second oldest conservation organization in the United States. The first is the Sierra Club, 1892, and then we were founded in 1895. A lot of history, a lot of great work, but it all starts in the Bronx and in Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan in our facilities there.
That's incredible, and thanks for sharing a little bit about the Wildlife Conservation Society, its global impact. So, John, how did a kid from the Bronx get to the Wildlife Conservation Society, stumping, the hallways in Washington with Elliot Engel, and tell us about that transition and what government was like, how it prepared you for this.
So I've got to tell you, you're probably not going to hear this very often, but I got this job in Albania. And you're gonna that's, if you remember anything from this experience, from this time together, you're gonna be like, how did he get this job in Albania? Well, and it's also one of those life lessons, which I'd love to leave everybody with, is like, you never know where your next job is going to come from. Even though you don't think about it, you're always in a, you're kind of, not want to say in a selling mode, but you're kind of marketing yourself. So those opportunities, you have no idea. So I had been working for Congressman Engel, who at the time was a senior member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and we've been very active in the Balkans and working on the Balkans issues. Some of you may recall back in the late 90s, we had gotten involved with the Dayton Accords, and then after that, we had bombed Serbia and parts of Kosovo because of a huge refugee crisis that was occurring. Well, that crisis had ended, and we were going over literally about 3 months after the war had stopped to go on the kind of the first mission, members of Congress who were taking Albanian Americans from across the country back. They had not been there in many, many years. So I am literally on a bus going from Tirana to Skopje to Pristina. The bus was new sometime in the late 60s, early 70s. It breaks down along the way. We're stuck on this bus, on this road, and everybody on the bus, Bianca Jagger's on this bus. It was just kind of this bizarre, once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I got to speaking to people, and somebody said, my friend just became president of the of the Bronx Zoo, he said, and he's really looking for someone who's interested in government affairs. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do at the Bronx Zoo? I had no idea of the global mission. I had no idea of the work that it was doing. And I said, you know what? When I get back, I'll go and meet with them. And of course, Matt, we literally went to a wonderful Italian restaurant on Arthur Avenue. And I learned a little bit about the organization and what it was doing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to throw my hat in. 6 months later, a 6 months review process later, this is obviously pre-Zoom, I flying back and forth between New York and DC, coming back for these meetings, they offered me the position, literally the Ides of March, interesting, March 15th. And I started there in 2000. And candidly, I have one of those jobs that I don't see any reason ever to leave. It's incredible work that I'm able to do on a daily basis. And I just feel fortunate to have this opportunity.
That's really special. Oh, Albania. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first.
You heard it here first.
Your future career paths go to Albania.
Yeah.
That's how you find out the great jobs. John, it's really, really wonderful and encouraging to hear you talk about not wanting to leave your job. And I've got to tell you, we don't want you to leave your job either. You've really done an amazing job. And, we are interested in, continuing to see you grow and continuing to serve all of us. And many of us have grown up going to, the museums and aquariums that you help oversee, help protect, and as I think about it, you told this great story about Albania and how you learned. What can you do? How have you seen yourself grow and expand in this position and the whole conservation movement?
I think what's exciting for me is that, and I literally thank this generation. There has been this moment where people are starting to realize how relevant nature is. I think sometimes people look at nature, and especially when you live in New York, you don't really think about the wild. You're living in Manhattan, you've got enough issues to deal with. But what's happened over the past, let's say 10 to 15 years, people are waking up to the needs to save the Congo, to save Africa, to certain parts of Africa, certain parts of the Amazon and Asia, not just simply because they're beautiful, but because it's also important to them. That by saving those places and protecting those places, we're helping to protect life on Earth. And I hate to say it, but it's this confluence literally over the last 2 years where you start to look at the issues of pandemics, the issues of biodiversity loss, and you start to realize that all these things are connected. And they're connected because of the fact that our relationship with nature is really broken down. So that's, for me, the last 20 years of my life, as I've been kind of on this journey, is learning more about that. Because when I came here, it's like, wow, I'm working at the zoo. It's a great place where you educate kids. And it is. And you think about all the cultural institutions in New York, the CIGs, as you were mentioning, 2.5 million young people come to those institutions every year. I mean, that is one of the incredible things about living in New York, that you have the best. Literally, they talk about the Smithsonian. We have the Smithsonian in New York. We just have to come up with a better name. We're going to call it the Washingtonian, right? It is just amazing what we have here at our fingertips as young people. And for me, that's what kind of sparked my early interest, right? Being able to go to the zoo, being able to go to the American Museum of Natural History. I remember going to the New York Hall of Science and seeing rockets for the first time. It was amazingly cool. That's what you have in New York. But so back to your question, what has happened is all those things have converged, right? This understanding that it's important to save wildlife and wild places, not just because it's a good thing to do, but not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that, John. And, continuing with that, the work that you've done, through Wildlife Conservation Society, your experiences, in government, can you talk a little bit more about public-private partnerships in general? I know that you've been involved in many partnerships. I think there's a nature preserve in Argentina, Tierra del Fuego, that you've been quite involved in. And so globally, can you talk a little bit more about public-private partnerships? ABNY represents all of it. We're public, we're private, we're excited, we're energetic. And so how have you made these work and be effective, throughout your time and throughout the different places that you've engaged and interacted?
Well, I'll tell you that what's most important is having spent many, many years in government. I worked at the city and the state and the federal level. Government plays an incredible and invaluable role, but also the private sector must play a critical role as well. And finding those opportunities where we can work together. So going back to the Cultural Institutions Group just for a second. So what the CIGs, and you can find out more about them, cignyc.org, what they are is it's public land, public buildings, privately managed. So we actually have DC 37 employees on our, that work for the Wildlife Conservation Society. We have an incredible opportunity to work with the city of New York. It's always somewhat challenging. I'm not going to lie. It's not always roses, but by and large, they know that we're their partner and they know that we're trying to do the right thing. We start off from this place of a public good. So understanding that it's a public good and that we have this public responsibility, what's amazing about New York and candidly the United States, having traveled the world, is the number of philanthropists that we have that, small, medium, and large, right, that are willing to give monies, that are willing to support organizations like ours. So what you have is these 34 institutions that together have almost 15,000 employees. And as I said before, 2.5 million visitors that are children, young people. And, the Bronx Zoo alone is the largest employer of youth in the borough of the Bronx. We're these incredibly important economic engines in our boroughs. So we bring the best of the private and the best of the public sector. The Tierra del Fuego, and, I was not going to correct you as you're speaking, the land that we have is in Chile. And if between Chile and Argentina, that's another program. We'll do another program on that. But the land we have is is the island literally at the tip of South America, which is Tierra del Fuego, land of fire. This area is, the farthest south that you have land that has trees, actually. And what's fascinating is you're about 800 miles from the South Pole. And I've had the pleasure of going down there a couple of times. Interestingly enough, you kind of look at this, there was a company that wanted to have a sustainable tree harvesting business there. And just note to self, it takes about 100 years for a tree to grow down there. So I don't know how they ever thought this was going to be sustainable. So working with Goldman Sachs, they had received these properties through notes that they had purchased. And they decided, Gentleman Hank Paulson, former Secretary of the Treasury, he decided that he was not going to sell this land, but he wanted to give it and create a park. So through a process, we were the ones that received the land, and it is a private park that's open to the people of Chile. Great fishing, because one of the things that we did down there is we put fish that are not indigenous to that area. They have no natural predators. So therefore, these fish are humongous. They shouldn't be there. So go fish down there if you can, because you're helping to clean up the environment. Incredibly beautiful area that is now going to be saved in perpetuity. And that was this public-private partnership. Working with the private sector, we were able to get the land, but now we're working very closely with the Chilean government to make sure that this land stays pristine.
That's incredible. And thanks for the correction. My South American geography at the most southern tip is a little bit off. So thank you for the correction.
You were right, because Tierra del Fuego is split between Argentina and Chile, but we have the Chilean sides where our property is.
Got it. All right. I appreciate when I learn something new. So thanks for that, John. I do want to talk a little bit about the past year, COVID and all of that. But before we get there, family's important, growing up. And can you just talk a little bit about, what it was like growing up in the Bronx and how that had impact on what you're doing today?
It's very funny. I was joking earlier with you. I consider myself an immigrant born in the Bronx. So my parents were both immigrants from southern Italy. And after I was born, we were born on 180th and Hughes. To me, the Bronx Zoo was kind of like our world traveling, right? We would be able to go to the Bronx Zoo and say, oh, today we're going to go to Africa, or today we're going to go to South America, or today we're going to go to Asia. You had the world at your fingertips. Poverty, you didn't know if you were poor or rich. You knew that you had these incredible opportunities as a kid to be able to experience these things. My parents I was very young, decided to move back to Italy. So we literally, as a child, I went back to southern Italy by boat and landed in Italy. After about 9-10 months, my father said, what am I doing here? I got to get back to America. He literally turned around, found a job, and we moved to another part of the Bronx, Barnes Avenue in Allerton. And I stayed, finished kindergarten. My brother finished first grade, got back on a boat, came back, literally landed on the west side of Manhattan, my father waiting at the pier. I had this incredible kind of almost late 19th, 20th century experience in the late 20th century. It was amazing to kind of think back at that moment. Got in a borrowed Mustang that my father had gotten from another immigrant who had a car, and we drove back up to the Bronx to our new home and lived there for a few years, and then we moved up to New Rochelle. And the reason we moved to New Rochelle, interestingly enough, is because we couldn't afford a brick house on Pelham Parkway. So that, it's amazing. But quickly came back to the Bronx, went to Fordham University, Fordham Law, and I will tell you that to me, the Bronx is one of those special places where you have incredible universities. It's the borough of universities, nothing against Manhattan, but it was the borough of universities and the borough of parks, and just been a special place to work. So to come back after all of this, I leave, go to DC. I'm in DC for 12 years, and then have this opportunity to come back to the borough that I love really meant a lot.
That's pretty special, and appreciate the family connection. Family is so important. I love family, and it's also pretty exciting that you grew up in the Bronx. You got to experience the world through the Bronx Zoo. I love family. I know that you do too. So I've got a special treat for you, John, and I just want you to talk about what I'm going to share with everybody right now. All right?
I'm very frightened. Oh.
So John, tell us who that little kid with the red hat is.
That is me. That is me. That is me. That is my father, and that's my brother. So yesterday was National Sibling Day. So called Lou today. I forgot it was National Sibling Day. Every day is National Sibling Day for me. But that is the three of us in what's called Astor Court. That's the monkey house behind us. And that's what a great picture. It brings back a lot of good memories. And I'll tell you that I do have no shame. I literally brought that photo with me when I applied for the job. I showed that picture, and that's the kind of special place that the Bronx Zoo is for me personally, and it's for so many. I would imagine everybody has that first experience, seeing an elephant or seeing a lion or seeing a tiger. But just really being there with your family and having that experience together. I love how Dad's in a suit, because it's the only way you really have to go is in a suit.
That's right. John, thanks for being a good sport about that. I thought it was a fun picture, one that you shared, and really special. And I think to everyone who's joined us this morning, it clearly runs through his veins. From his early days, he was hanging out at the Bronx Zoo, and he's still hanging out at the Bronx Zoo.
Absolutely.
John, you talked a little bit earlier about CIGs and the importance of culture and people visiting, the Bronx Zoo, the New York Aquarium, Central Park Zoo, these wonderful places. In the past year during the pandemic, everything changed. It was, you leading the cultural institutions group and other things just had to transform. We had these, amazing, animals that still needed to be taken care of. And, what was it like, thinking about programming, thinking about protecting, the animals, thinking about this mission of wildlife conservation without being able to show people the importance of wildlife conservation? So can you just talk with us a little bit about, COVID-19, how that impacted the society, but how it impacted culture throughout the city and throughout the world?
So, the good thing about New York is, culture never closed. What happened is culture went online. One of the things that we did very early on was to make sure that we had cams, these cameras, so that people could literally go online and experience that a bit. We took a lot of our programming virtually so that people could experience coming to the park without having to physically come to the park. But before all of that actually happened, we had to get our workers deemed essential workers. The fact is there's so many other things going on that we had to make the case, like we need these workers to be able to go in to take care of these animals, because without them, they cannot live. So that was the first, I mean, literally the first thing that had to happen. And I was on a bit of a sabbatical at the time, and I want to really thank my colleagues, Sarah Marinello and Daisy Rodriguez. They did incredible work during my absence. And when I got back, I was kind of thrown back into the cultural institutions group and trying to figure out how do we stay afloat and relevant during this moment. And interestingly enough, we became more relevant. People, I mean, let's think back a year ago. People were just looking for anything just to kind of have a different experience. I feel like I've been in this room for a year and a half, and I literally have been in this room for a year. It's like, how do I kind of transport myself out of where I am? And the zoo and the work that we do became so much more important because it gave people that outlet, and really also that educational outlet. And if you don't, go to bronxzoo.com, go to wcs.org, and you can learn a little bit about what we're doing. And the way we educated people, I've been sending out almost a weekly newsletter about what's happening at the park, what they could do, information, little tidbits about animals and wildlife. So it really became this opportunity to think outside the box. So, it was a crisis, it was unfortunate, but it also forced us to think differently. And I'm confident that we will never really go back to the way it was before, right? Things are going to fundamentally change. Having said that, we as the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium and our facilities, we were actually fortunate enough to open early because we're outside venues. So through some educating of our leaders in Washington at Albany and City Hall, we were able to then make the case that we should be able to open. And that's been one of the great things. Literally getting people back to the park. We opened the end of July 24th. So we are now, I believe, probably the most visited cultural attraction in New York. Our parks have had over 1.5 million people come through our parks, knock on wood, healthy experiences. People are following the guidelines. That's another great thing about New Yorkers. They can complain, but at the end of the day, they're going to do the right thing. And they've made it a pleasurable experience for everybody. And somebody just put into the chat, we have this great program called the Zoo. And if you think I've been at the zoo a long time, my colleague, Jim Brahini, who's our zoo director, he literally started there when he was 13 years old. And he's been working at the zoo. I mean, it's literally the only job the guy's had, right? And he has been a dear friend of mine, but more importantly, really the person who's narrated this experience called the zoo. And you get this behind the scenes experience. And people just loved it because you see, there's nothing like a guy with a Bronx accent talking about an emu. It's just like, it's a little bit incongruous. People are like, wait a minute. And, the line, this is the way it happens in the boogie down Bronx. It's the truth. I mean, it's these real people taking care of these incredible animals. And that it's a fun show, but it's also very educational.
That's pretty great. We're all going to have to check out the zoo, and we have quite some amazing and interesting characters. I mean, I just want to hear the Bronx guy talk about the emu. It sounds amazing already. So sign me up for it. Speaking of animals, you've been at the Wildlife Conservation for some time. John, what's your favorite animal, and tell us why?
Well, since my wife's nearby, her favorite animal is the giraffe. So every time I go, I got to go see the giraffes. But mine is the lion. I love the lions. I think obviously they're cool, but what they stand for, what they symbolize, that kind of strength, caring about community. They're beautiful. They're just very, I enjoy them. And, but I've got to tell you, there's something about the gorillas as well that are just incredibly fun. I see Sarah smiling up there. It's, everybody has that favorite experience that they've had, which I've got to share one with the gorillas. Early on in my experience there, I actually had been working with our global conservation program, and we were able to announce a new national park in the Republic of Congo. So the foreign minister of the Republic of Congo was coming through New York, and we were going to make the announcement at the Bronx Zoo in the Congo Gorilla Forest. So I am there walking with the foreign minister and several of my colleagues, and we kind of come down. And if you've been to the Congo gorilla, you know where I'm talking. You kind of come down this ramp, and then right in front of you, you see these gorillas. And literally, they don't have to be there. There's the exhibit's very large. They could be on the other side, but they're as curious as we are. So they came forward, and as he's walking down, one of the gorillas flipped the foreign minister the bird. So the minister looks to me and I say, that's how we say hello in the Bronx. So that is one of many great stories from my times at the Bronx Zoo.
That's great. You got to be quick on your toes for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You got to be.
That's something special. You know, John, when you were talking about culture and sort of getting back from the pandemic, one of the things you said was, you know, we're not going to get back to the way things were. Things are undoubtedly permanently changed. I think in some respect, we have seen the opportunity that digital and online can produce, and trying to build, you know, these bridges between in-person and digital. You know, as someone who's led the cultural institutions group, still engaged, you know, what do you see happening with the CIGs and cultural programming over the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, first of all, one of the great things that happened under my tenure there was that we had Weeksville join the Weeksville Center, which is a historically incredible historic story of the freed black slave, free blacks that were former slaves that created this community and these buildings that were there, the story that they were telling. We were working very closely. They became a CIG. And I share that because as much as I love the Bronx Zoo and the Wildlife Conservation Society, New York is an incredible place. There are so many stories that need to be told. We need to be respectful of that. We need to look outside of these 34. Are there other cultural institutions that should be included and be part of the CIG? So what I see over the next 5 to 10 years is potentially a bit of an expansion so that there are more voices, more programming, more cultural programming out there. Not just in Manhattan, but in all 5 boroughs. So that's one of the kind of the trajectories that I see. I agree that this kind of hybrid is going to exist, where you're going to see more cultural programming online. But I got to tell you, there's something about going into a theater or going to the zoo or going to a museum and having that visceral experience of seeing and learning with others. That's not going to change. I just don't see that. I think people are actually clamoring for that to come back. And you can see in our numbers last week, we have limited time ticketing. We were sold out. We could not bring anybody else into the park. There were no more spots available. So people are looking for these experiences to get outside, to learn and to enjoy and to be with other people. So there's something real. I mean, if you wanted to be alone, you wouldn't be living in New York, most likely.
The
right?
mic's off right now.
Okay, somebody's mic is off. So I think there's going to be a healthy mix of both, and we're going to have to learn how to navigate that. My comment was actually more on the job side, right? I think New York is going to change, where people are going to come back. Are they going to come back to the office 5 days a week? Probably not. Is it going to be 3 days a week? Yeah, who knows? Every place will be different. I got an interesting statistic yesterday where, despite the fact that Manhattan restaurants weren't doing as well, Brooklyn restaurants were doing better because more people were living at home and working from home and eating in local eateries, in their neighborhoods. So there's going to be kind of this interesting realignment in some ways, and we're going to have to rethink, what does a cultural experience look like? How do we get visitors back to New York City? I mean, that's one of the big things people don't realize. Culture is always seen as this nice thing to do, or it's good for the kids. Well, those are all true, but it's also important to our economy. When you think about the role that culture plays and tourism at large plays, if we don't get tourism back, if we don't get Broadway back, if we can't go to the Met or we can't go to these incredible experiences across the Queen's Theater, we suffer, and we suffer. Our soul suffers and our pocketbook suffers.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Related to it, John, Gregory Kirsop has a question for you, so I'm going to let Gregory ask his question. I think it's right in line with what you were just talking about, and you're pretty popular. People are jumping in line to ask you some questions, so we're going to jump in. So, Gregory, if you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, John, thank you so much for joining us this morning. So you talked a little bit about some of the great things that you have been doing during the COVID pandemic. But kind of on the other side of this, with tourism down in the city, what can we kind of be doing to assist, different protected areas and different, wildlife ventures across New York?
That's a really great question. Here in New York, there's a great group called the Natural Aries Conservancy, which a friend, a dear colleague of mine, Eric Sanderson, has been an active leader in. They do great work to help protect. People don't realize there's over 20,000 acres of wild lands in New York City. Do you realize that? I mean, people have no idea, but again, I hate to say the Bronx, but you come up to the Bronx and you go to Pelham Bay Park, or you go to Van Cortlandt Park. There are areas of that are what are called forever wild. Staten Island, all throughout the city, there are these great places. Finding out if there are places there where they could use your help to support cleanups and things of that nature, always very, very helpful. We are in the process of looking at a couple of different campaigns. One of the campaigns that we took on at the Wildlife Conservation Society was called Give a Sip. It was really about single-use plastics. We put it on hold for the past year and a half, but we're going to kind of come back and look at single-use plastics again and what can we do and what makes sense. And that has an impact not here, but across the world when you look at how much plastic we're throwing into the oceans and the incredibly negative impact that's having on our marine world. One of the other things is, being more sensitive to what you're buying and where it's coming from. People don't realize we all have a tremendous impact on the wild, whether it's the lithium that drives cars or it's the coffee that we buy. All those things actually have an impact in the wild places. We hear a lot about what's happening from China in terms of where things are being made and the impact there. We're also having an impact in these wild places as well. So just being sensitive to that as much as possible. But I hate to say it, one of the greatest things you could do is obviously support the Wildlife Conservation Society, get involved in some of our campaigns. We're working on one right now called Protect Wildlife, Protect Us. It's a campaign to help stop future pandemics. And you may ask the question, what is the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Bronx Zoo doing talking about future pandemics? Well, the fact is that, and again, I'm a lawyer, so I have learned all of this through osmosis and through incredible teachers at the Wildlife Conservation Society, like Paul Calley, our chief veterinarian, or Chris Walzer, our chief global health person. Long story short is over 60% of all diseases are called zoonotic. They transfer between humans and wildlife and back, right? And the COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. It traveled between animals, and then it went from those animals to a human, and then it became what we know today. And it's COVID-19. There have been many before it. People don't realize that the Wildlife Conservation Society discovered the West Nile virus in New York City because of a gift, monies that we'd gotten from the New York City Council. We were able to do necropsies on wild birds and realized that West Nile was in New York City. CDC didn't believe us. It was actually the Army that confirmed our finding. And that changed the way we had to deal with protocols in New York and across the country. That's what WCS does. That's who we are. We've been doing a lot of that same research around the world right now. And guess what? One of the things that our scientists are saying is we have to close wildlife markets. We have to stop the selling of wildlife for live wildlife markets for human consumption. Why? That's where this mixing is happening. That's where these animals are jumping, these pathogens are jumping from one to another. This makes a heck of a lot of sense. And at the end, we'll be in a much stronger position. So it's called Protect Wildlife, Protect Us. You can go to the WCS.org website. we are supporting, I know this is going to sound crazy, a bipartisan piece of legislation that is supported by Senator Booker from New Jersey and Senator Cornyn, Republican from Texas. These two have come together on this legislation. We're building a co-sponsorship list now. We have another bill that Congresswoman Meng from Queens is working on with Congressman Fortenberry, Republican from Nebraska. One of the things that we believe in is that conservation and saving nature, it's not a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, Tea Party, progressive, DSA. It's a human value that we have to take into account. We have to save nature for everyone. We can argue the politics later. We need to think about saving ourselves and making sure that we save our planet. So that's this legislation that we're working on. If any of you are interested, we can always use a hand promoting that and making sure that people are aware of the importance of doing this. And shout out to Lucy Liu and Horizon Media and Saatchi. All those people have done that work pro bono. They put an incredible campaign together for us pro bono. Lucy Liu gave her time as narrator. Saatchi did all the creative. That is the amazing thing about New York. You put a great idea out there, you put a good issue out there, and you ask for help, and people have come out and they've helped. And we're kind of excited. We think we've got a really good chance of getting this legislation passed, even in the midst of all, let's say, the challenges that we're facing in Washington, D.C. with bipartisanship.
That's John, that's really incredible. And thank you. Thank you for sharing the work that you're doing. I mean, bipartisan support. We've got to focus on human issues and not political issues. And so this is clearly a human. This is a wildlife issue. And so, thank you for being the champion of it. And the market for animals being sold for human consumption is a major issue. But go ahead. You were going to share something.
No, and I'm going to. And it's funny as I'm thinking here and reflecting with all of you. It's one of the reasons why I love staying at WCS. Right? It's working across the aisle. It's finding places where there's common ground. There's so few places where we find that it's kind of energizing for me to say, wait a minute, don't look at this as a liberal or a conservative. Look at this as a human being and what we need to be doing as human beings. And that's kind of a great thing. And I'd spent my life in pretty partisan politics. So it's a nice thing to be able to find that space in Washington, D.C. today.
That's really great. John, up next, we've got another audience question. This one coming from Bill Colonna, and then we'll have Fariborz Fatemi, and then Jeff Rodas.
Oh boy. Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Matthew. Hi, John. Good to see you. Thanks for spending time with us this morning. So I've worked in and with government for the past 15 or so years, and I truly believe in the power of mentorship. And so I'm just wondering if you might share with the group, give us a sense of who some of your most impactful mentors have been throughout the course of your career, or if you don't want to, highlight one or two, maybe some of the key characteristics that they've had and how they've sort of shaped your professional career. And I will stay on video for as long as my daughter will permit me.
And Bill, I would be remiss if I did not say that Fordham University is by far the greatest university on the planet and a wonderful institution of higher learning. I am a double alum, college and law school, and it's good to see you, Bill. And your baby, oh my God, it's got big. So, you think back, there was a high school professor at Salesian he was a history professor and got me interested in history. There was a professor at Fordham University named Paul Palumbo, who was taught me about history, political science. I knew nothing about my own heritage. I mean, that's one of the crazy things about sometimes you don't learn about who you are, where you came from. You live in a bit of a cocoon. And Professor Palumbo helped me understand what was going on in southern Italy in the 19th century and why 4 million Italians left and the discrimination that they faced here and the experiences and that journey that they went on. He was a real role model for me growing up. And I have to say, a mentor of mine is also Congressman Engel. Elliot, you have to understand, I was 24 years old when I ran this campaign for Congress. And at the age of 25, I asked him if I could be his chief of staff in Washington, D.C. And I didn't even know where the bathrooms were, let alone how, I had studied political science, but I had been to Washington, I think, 3 times. And he took a chance on me. And I think that, to me, is one of the reasons why I'm always one to say, let's give young professionals a chance, because somebody gave me that chance. So I feel like the sense of having to pay it forward. So those are kind of 3 people. And of course, at the end of the day, your greatest mentors are always your parents, right? Your parents are always the ones that give you, roots and wings, right? They give you the roots of being in this, the sense of family and the strength that comes from family, and then the wings to be able to go off and do new things. And I was blessed, and I'm still blessed with 2 parents that gave me that opportunity.
That's wonderful to hear. Thanks for the question, Bill, and thanks for the great answer, John. So up next, Fairborse Fatemi. You can unmute yourself.
Good morning, John.
Hey, Fairborse.
Wanted to ask you, since you and I were both involved in foreign policy, the help that, or the experience of being involved in foreign policy, how has that come into your job in terms of conservation in Africa? And I'm so concerned about what is happening to wildlife and who is protecting and who's helping to do that. And I'm in this day and age, with all the problems we're facing, no one seems to be caring about that, and especially the African countries, they're having a lot of difficulty. And is there some programs that you're working on and doing something on that? And great to see you, and thanks for inviting me to join with you on this program.
Fairborse, great to see you. And Fairborse and I worked together in Washington, D.C. On foreign policy issues back in the 90s and early 2000s. And I will tell you that the challenges facing not just African countries, but the planet on this issue of wildlife, this is not an African issue or an Asian issue, it's a global issue. And I will share one experience, which is really the supply chain. So I worked on a campaign called 96 Elephants. People don't realize 96 elephants were killed every day in Africa for their ivory. And who was doing the killing? Criminal syndicates. It wasn't local communities per se. It was the Lord's Resistance Army. There was information Al-Shabaab was involved. We had other information Boko Haram was involved. So what happens is these criminal syndicates are killing these elephants for their ivory and then using it almost as bush currency. So wildlife trafficking, people don't realize it's the 4th largest criminal activity on the planet. And we need to be very sensitive to that, because those in this case, ivory is coming out of Africa and then going to Asia and then coming to the United States. People don't realize the United States is one of the largest markets in the world. So I think it's very important to start from we have to take the preconditions, these notions that we have that it's a problem in Africa or a problem in Asia. It's a global problem that we need to be dealing with at a global level. And I was happy to have worked on that campaign. We closed the ivory markets here in New York. Then we closed them in California, Hawaii, then in the United States. Then President Obama worked with President Xi in China. China closed their ivory markets. And we've seen a diminution in the number of elephants being killed. We've seen an impact because we helped to get rid of that market. So when countries work together, that's, again, somewhat of an internationalist. When we work together and we create a set of legal regimes that we all support, guess what happens? People can follow those rules and we start to see success. So I am heartened because I think the Biden administration gets that. You start to look at their 30 by 30 strategy, which is to help protect 30% of our land and waters by 2030. That is going to become a global. It is a global program. We're kind of coming late to the party, but the fact is now it's not just enough to say we're going to do that. Now we have to follow through and support these countries, because it becomes important for all of us to work together.
That's great, and thanks for sharing that, and just the encouragement, the outlook for the 30 for 30 and how we get there, John. So thanks for staying on top of it.
And Matt, I wanted to just share. There's another, to get a little bit more information about this whole concept of conservation and the importance of conservation and security, because people don't realize that these things come together. There's a campaign that we helped launch. It's an educational campaign called naturalsecurity.us. If you go online, you can find out more about it. What it is it's really helping to make people understand the confluence between conservation and security. This idea that if we don't deal with the natural world, we are going to be having huge security issues across our planet. And that's just not on wildlife trafficking, but it's also on climate change. All these things are fundamentally based on our relationship with nature. And that, to me, is what we need to be educating people about. And that's what it's all about, coming to our parks and learning more about these incredible animals. It's really helping to spur that level of excitement, interest, so that people can then take the next step.
That's really wonderful. And I just want to give a big shout out to everyone who's putting the links into the chat, Mio and Daisy, who work with you, John, and Laura at Abney. I saw Hunter from the Natural Aries Conservancy drop some stuff in there. There's some great links in there in the chat, everyone, so make sure to grab those links. Next, we may have a hardball question for you.
I'm ready.
Jeff Rodas has the floor.
I do not answer any questions Jeff Rodas shares. I just want to be clear.
and then just Jeff, just really quickly, let me just line up the next ones. We hope to get these final questions in, but we'll have, after Jeff, Beth Axelrod, then Gretchen Dykstra. And so then we'll try to wrap up. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to see you, by the way, and see a lot of friends on the call. John Calvelli, an amazing person and a good friend, and I'm going to try to keep it as soft-fallish as possible, sir. So my question to you is, coming out of the pandemic, as we are now, and I know you do a lot of work with the city and state around issues affecting cultural institutions, and I know we've spoken about it many times in the past. What should government be doing now to help you guys open in a better way than you have been? The second part of my question is, with the political tsunami taking over New York City and all the new elected officials that we're going to have 9 months from now, 8 months from now, whatever it is, how are you going to educate them? And what are you doing to make sure they understand culture's place in the city in terms of tourism? Now, the hardball question: what's your favorite restaurant on Arthur Avenue?
I was waiting for you to ask that. I thought that's where you're going to go first. So I'll save that till the end. I think and thanks for asking the question, Jeff, and I love your family and your brother. The first question about where we are with city and state, the one thing that we need more than anything else is clarity, right? It's simply to know, when are we going to be able to increase our numbers? When are we going to be able to kind of move forward? You know, we are in this kind of odd situation, the Bronx Zoo, the New York Botanical Garden. We are outdoor exhibits, but we have indoor exhibits as well, right? So that therefore, even though we can go to 33% within outdoor experiences, you can only go to 25% in an indoor museum. So therefore, we've actually had to turn people away because we just don't have capacity within our park. So it's kind of, odd that restaurants can open to 50 and 75%, and we're still at 25%. So therefore, there's a lack of clarity there. So I think it's important to understand what are the milestones that we need to meet in order to be able to open up over the next 2, 3, 4 months, so that therefore we know what that glide path looks like. And, look at us and what have we done? And I think we've done a pretty good job, not just the Bronx Zoo or the Wildlife Conservation Society, but really all the culturals in terms of how we've opened and done a good job. That's number one. The second question about the political tsunami, you're absolutely right. The next 8 to 9 months, we're going to see over 70% of a new city council, a new mayor, new controller. it's really going to be a time. And guess what? We've been here before. This was 8 years ago. Let's go back to 2013. We were in the same place, new mayor, new controller, new city council. That's what happens with term limits. With term limits, you just have these cyclical changes, overarching changes. And we may want to think a little bit about that. Is this the best way to do it, where we lose all of this experience all at one time? And, you can argue yes and no, but it's something to be thinking about. What have we been doing? We've been having meetings with mayoral candidates one-on-one. Our colleagues have been meeting with city council candidates so that they can understand who we are and what we do. A lot of these individuals running, why would they ever think about the Bronx Zoo other than, hey, I'm going to go there with my kids, or I'm going to have a wonderful day going to the American Museum of Natural History or to the garden, whatever. What ends up happening here is we have to educate them on the incredible role that we play, and that's ongoing. And another group, I'm going to throw another group at you, New Yorkers for Culture and Arts, which is a cultural advocacy group. They are organizing the second ever, because we did the first one in 2013, but the second ever mayoral forum, and that's going to be in April. I'm going to say April 18th. It may be the 21st. I'm not remembering exactly, but if you go to New Yorkers for Culture and Arts, ny4ca.org, we're going to be having literally all the mayoral candidates talk about how they look at culture, what their plans are. And what's really different, Jeff, than 8 years ago is that what you're finding right now is almost every one of the mayoral candidates has put together an arts and cultural agenda, which is exciting. People are realizing that it's important to think about this sector because we are relevant. And last, certainly not least, I'm going to go with Roberto's.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Take it to the bank. Roberto's is the place to go on Arthur Avenue. Thanks for sharing that, John. Up next, we have Beth Axelrod, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A with Gretchen Dykstra. And thanks, everyone, for holding on. Hopefully, we can get in these last two questions. I know we're 2 minutes away from 11, so maybe if we can get a little bit of overtime, I would appreciate everyone's patience.
Hi, John. I'm one of Tatmer's crew. How are you doing?
Hey, hi, Beth. How are you?
We've met before. Yeah. So it's great to see you. I'm not from the Bronx, but my father is, and is a proud DeWitt Clinton graduate. So I hear the cheer all the time. And thank you so much for talking to us today. I've been really fascinated by learning more about the expansive work that you do, and especially the relationship between pandemics and global health. Thank you so much for that. And my question is actually a little similar, I believe, to Jeffrey's. I was just thinking about your restrictions in terms of how many people you can have inside, and even thinking about the Weeksville location that you mentioned. And if you had come up with or working to come up with other ways to bring people outside, so to speak, in the locations that really need an inside tour. For example, at the aquarium, there's some programming outside, but I would say a good deal of it is inside. So I also assume there's a revenue issue there too.
Yeah, and a great question. Thank you, Beth, for asking the question, and touched on this a little bit, but at the end of the day, we've taken a lot of what we do online, so that if you go to our website, you can actually, we have these cams that you can experience our exhibits firsthand, right? So that was the kind of step one. Step two is our education department really helped to put a lot of our programming online. So for example, when I said, we're the largest employer of youth in the borough, we have one of the largest workforce development programs for young people in the city of New York. It is amazing. They created an online program for virtual docents, so that you can actually work for the Bronx Zoo and learn, but doing it all virtually. And this is all brand new. And I share WCS and our experience. Literally many, many other cultural institutions have done the same thing. We've been working very closely with the city, and I was fortunate to serve on the mayor's task force for reopening. What we're trying to do is, again, that level of clarity and knowing when we can open. And we're not experts from a healthcare perspective. We will leave that to the healthcare experts. But having that sense of knowing when we can make that next step would be very helpful to get back to some level of normalcy. And that has been, one of the challenges.
That's great. Thank you, John. It looks like Gretchen is off, so we'll wrap up here. I just want to just ask you to close us out. We're 10 days away from Earth Day. What are your thoughts and visions for Earth Day this year and ongoing years? And this is the ABNY YP group, young professionals. What words of advice and encouragement do you have for the young professionals and those of us who are about to get kicked out of the young professionals group and those who may have stepped out a couple years ago? And so thank you for being here.
Because I have to say, there's several of my dear colleagues on here, and Claire Coleman told me I had to mention her, so I wanted to say hi, Claire. So with, if I think about this Earth Day, the answer would have been much different a year ago. I am immensely full of hope, and I am full of hope because we are now reaching a new understanding of our relationship with nature. We understand that we have a responsibility to protect nature, protect wildlife, wild places. And that new relationship will manifest itself literally on Earth Day. President Biden is calling a first of its kind meeting to announce the US's commitment to the 30 by 30, we hope also to look at this thing called nature-based solutions. Nature is 30% of the solution on climate change. One of the best things that we could do is literally plant a tree and to protect the tree. These are the things that long-term will have an incredible benefit. And I share that because we're at this crossroads where the US is once again taking a leadership role on these issues. So this Earth Day is really the beginning of a new conversation, a new relationship between us and nature and between the United States and the rest of the world on these issues of climate change. So I'm incredibly hopeful. I hope that all of you look at that and say, we're turning the bend, light at the end of the tunnel. It is not a train coming at you. It is hope. And I literally look at this and say, it's really good to be an American right now because I see a lot of opportunity in the future.
That's really wonderful. John, thank you so much for your time. You're the best, as you know.
Thank you. You're the best. Thank you.
So grateful. Sarah, Lauren, Melva, thank you all for letting me host before you kick me out. And this has just been a lot of fun for me. I hope everyone has enjoyed. And Sarah, I'll pass the mic back over to you to wrap us up. Any final remarks?
Thanks so much, Matthew. Just want to say thank you for being such an all-star YP steering committee member. And John, Matthew, this was a pleasure. We're so excited that you guys joined us today. This will be on YouTube if anyone didn't catch it, wants to see it later, wants to share with their friends. And we just really appreciate you joining us today for this Boardroom Breakfast.
Thank you for the opportunity and look forward. I am clearly not a young professional anymore, but consider me a friend of the young professional. So is any way I can be of assistance in the future, just call on me. Thank you. And thank you more importantly for doing this. It's really important. And I look forward to the day where we actually can be in one place and we can see each other face to face and get to know each other even better. So thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Melva. Good seeing you.